Hey everyone. So from that last scene, the video's kind of been stalled out. I've had to go ahead and wait for some parts, especially some lifters. We'll get to that here in a second. But while the bike was down, I said, well, all of these little holes in the block, in the side casings were dirty. They had very, just old thread locker on them. And, I didn't want to just start torquing stuff down with the threads full of old thread locker. So I went on Amazon. I got me like a cheap thread chaser kit. Here's the brand of this one, right? It's all right. It's pretty good. It has a lot of the standard sizes, has some metric sizes, so it's going to work on the Kawasaki's, the Harleys. And here's what it really looks like. It's just a couple of nuts, different sizes, and the threads have reliefs in them. So what it's going to do, as that thread chases and pushes out all of the old gunk, whether it's thread lock, whatever, anything else, it's going to rest in that channel. So as you clean those bolts, you could go ahead and clean the reliefs to make sure you're not getting anything in there. Same thing with the holes as well. You can see the little reliefs. That's going to let thread lock or whatever's in there is going to let that kind of sit there as it cleans it. So I went out and I cleaned all of the holes in here. Then I started to just package the hardware, put them separately. Because by the time I want to put this together, I don't want to be slowed down cleaning bolts and threads. Talking about bolts and stuff, this guy right here, it's a one-time use. It goes right here on the snout of the crank, and it stretches. You can see that washer. It's not exactly square. It has it has mushroomed already from the torque. So part of this process is getting a new set, just because once these stretch, they're not going to stretch the same specifications. That washer right there has mushroomed, so I don't want to go ahead and put that back on. I want to say semi-cheap insurance, $40, to make sure this bolt doesn't walk off the crank, which is also going to hold the oil pump together. Now, let's go ahead and show you the lifters as well, because that's what I've been waiting for to get this thing back together. All right, so in the other scene, we showed how one lifter kept on compressing. I couldn't get the lifter to hold solid after pushing oil through it. These were sitting in a bath of oil for a couple of days. I pushed oil through the oil holes there. All but one was able to hold solid. So that means that as our oil pump is pushing pressure, that rod is going to compress into the lifter, and it's probably not going to open the valve all the way. So I went ahead, I got some fueling lifters. There were more expensive ones. There was definitely more expensive fuelings. There was jegs. There was a bunch of options. Some of these are expensive as about $280 per lifter. Some of them, it's like, I don't know, $210 for the whole set. This is kind of mid-range. They already come in a bag, kind of pre-oiled and everything, but I'm going to go ahead and sit these in a little container of oil, just like these other ones were. Same oil that the motor is going to run. I'm going to let them sit here for a few hours, inject some oil in them as well, and then we're going to start the process all over again. But again, we have the bolts, oil pump is good, everything else is in the same order. After I cleaned all of the hardware, I put them in a bag. You can tell there's no more thread lock on them, which is nice. I went ahead and got some brand new thread lock, but I have in the the cabinet is kind of old, so red and blue. I love blue because you don't need a bunch of heat to get that thing off. But I'll follow the manual. If anything calls for red, I will go ahead and use that. Red Loctite, you need a lot of heat to actually get that sucker loose, so something you really don't want coming off. Blue, think of a part that you may have to remove, but you don't want budging unless you really don't have to. So I try to use blue when possible. And when putting everything back together, a little assembly lube with some zinc in the oil pump, for example, that really does help, kind of a dry start. So that's what I got going on. I'm going to try to film as much of the assembly as I can. I'm really good about talking through the process, showing you the parts on the table. I need to get better at actually recording the actual install. Now, with that said, you did have to go ahead and get a couple of gaskets. This is just like the cam chest gasket. I got a primary case gasket as well. So I try not to use gaskets unless I absolutely have to. So that's where we're at right now. I'll start recording the install. Take care, y'all. All right, so as I'm getting the O-rings kind of set up and matching them up with the replacements in the gasket kit and making sure they're all, first of all, the right size. With these kits, you could get maybe a different year, so you want to make sure that the ones you take out are the same as the ones you're putting in. Now, as I'm looking at the oil pump first, as you reassemble the cam chest, this is what I'm talking about. I take a chaser. You can do it by hand. The tougher stuff, might want to be careful and run maybe a hand tool. Definitely not an impact on this thing. But you can see there's old kind of thread locker on it. Before I put this thing back on, I want to go ahead and chase that through. Look, all that crap in that thread. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to all of them, but I wanted to show you guys an example of these. These are really good tools. I just don't want to put that back in. The thread locker that I'm going to put in is going to be brand new. So that's what it's going to look like. Again, when I put this on, you'll see me put some more assembly lube on the pump wheels as well, but just wanted to show you what that looks like. All right, so you could go ahead and do this a couple different ways. I've seen guys put all of the gears in here and then align it with the nose. Now, you're going to make sure that this O-ring is replaced. So are these. You're going to put this little intake is going to seat in there. And then you go ahead and you start feeding the gears. And you want to get this right on the same pitch as the snout. So may take a few attempts. There we go. That's going to sit right there. Then you go ahead and pop the divider. Now, the divider for the two, on this one, we have 2 oil gears. Some may have one, depending. This is an SNS. You can't get this wrong because this little notch is smaller than that one, and they have corresponding slots on the housing. So you put that there. This is kind of a spring ring. You see that's all wavy. It's meant to push these two aside and create a cavity. And again, these are all already kind of pre-oiled. You have now the second divider. Again, same as the first one, you can't really mess that up. And then you have the small and final ring gear set here. Let's see. I'm going to take a few. There we go. That's it. So that's how you initially put that pump on. Again, there is a sequence in the manual when you put the cam plate on and how you do this. It does want you to torque it a little bit, go back a bit, and then redo it. There's a sequence in the manual, but that's how you get the pump initially on there. Again, oil rings are already replaced. That's going to float a little bit there because this face will rest on the back of the cam plate. This one doesn't have an O-ring. Some of them will have an O-ring, like the original. It will have an O-ring there. So step 1 done. All right, so my oil pump is in. I went ahead and I put some assembly lube on the needle bearings for the cam. I put some assembly lube here on the snout as well, because that's going to ride in this brass bushing, and these are going to ride over there on the needle bearings. So what you don't want to do is force this in there. You also want to make sure that the alignment on the cams are facing each other. I didn't remove my cams, so I didn't have that problem, but if you did, it's really easy. You take that tensioner out and you go ahead and pop these in. There's a circlip right here. Make sure they're facing each other and you're good to go. So again, I don't want to force these in, but you just want to make sure that's going to locate. Also, there's a couple dowels right here. 2 locating dowels. You need to make sure these are still in and not stuck here. These O-rings have already been in place, so we're ready to go. Let's see. All right, boom. No drama. Okay, I didn't have to beat it in. It doesn't say to use these mounting holes to level it. So it went pretty good. These are spinning really easily in there, so I can kind of see that the needle bearings are there. There's no like binding. So I'm gonna leave these in here, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put these support bolts in here, and then we're gonna make sure we time it, of course. Once we go ahead and time it and all this stuff is snagged up, I'm gonna look at the manual, see what kind of sequence we have there. I'm gonna use a Loctite necessary if it calls for that, and then that's when we drop in our new push rod, our new lifters, Then we do our push rods, the whole mess. So you know, this is going pretty good like Lego so far. It just takes some patience. Make sure the threads are clean. Make sure you use a lot of assembly lube and Loctite where it calls it. All right, so the next part was a little difficult for me. Just a lot of putting stuff, checking it. So we went ahead and we got the oil pump aligned. Went ahead and torqued these to that about 95 foot-pounds. I'd rather not take a chance on stripping anything. So I went ahead and did like kind of the lower, 98 inch-pounds, excuse me. The next thing we have to do is we have to go ahead and set these two gears. So we're not timing them just yet, we have to set them. So that means is you take the used bolts and washers, not the new ones. The new ones we're gonna save a little bit later. So the used ones, you're gonna go ahead and tighten these two sprockets up to, the top one's gonna be 34 foot-pounds, the bottom one's gonna be 24 foot-pounds. So what you're trying to do, you're trying to set that gear onto these cams, and you're trying to set the gear onto the crank. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna make sure they're aligned and they're not like cattywampus when you put that chain on them. It doesn't want to wear out the chain. So the way they tell you to do that is to use one of these gear jammers. These are really good tools. So you're going to go ahead and just lock those in. You're going to torque them down. Once you torque them down, you get a straight edge and you get a feeler gauge. So the tolerance they need you to check for is 1,000, so 5 thousandths, 13 millimeters, 5 thousandths. I didn't have a straight edge. I don't know where mine is at, but I do know I have some stock that is super straight. So a little exaggeratory here. So you're going to go ahead and just place that on the crankshaft gear. You're going to hold it on the crankshaft gear, not like this, not between them, just on the crankshaft gear to make sure they're straight. You're going to make sure that you have access, so you get that little 5, and you want to make sure that that can slide under it. So if that 5 slides under that, it's perfect. It's not like super loose, but it's snug. So that means that those gears are aligned. Hopefully you have a better straight edge, a smaller straight edge. So now those gears are aligned. Now we can go ahead, undo these bolts, put the chain on. Just want to make sure that those are in fact pretty good. Next steps, make some progress. All right, so we got the camshaft sprocket and the crankshaft sprocket aligned. Let me show you what that looks like here. So you want to make sure that these two dots are facing each other. I marked them previously by some white paint so they're easy to see. These dots here on the clamshafts are going to point to each other as well. It's a little hidden behind here, but these point to each other as well. You also want to make sure that the chain goes on the same way, the same side. If you were to reverse this chain and put it back that way, that pulling force and that pulling wear is going to start working on the other side, and the chain's going to wear prematurely. So always mark your chain to make sure you know which side was the outside. You want to make sure that it pulls on the same direction. So that is aligned right now. What we're going to do with the new bolts, these are S&S bolts. These were, kind of the old ones. If you see that head's kind of worn a bit. Also, I mean, look at that washer. It's kind of like mushroomed out. So we want to go ahead and put some new ones on. They do say that you want to do two things to these before you slap them on. You want to put a little bit of oil, engine oil, on the cap here. That way the torque readings are going to be accurate. Same thing, a little bit of engine oil right here, a little bit of engine oil right there as well. And then what you're going to put on the threads is some thread locker. Now, if you're by the book, yes, you can look at the book and say, well, it calls for TB 1360, and that's fine. TB 1360. I'm going to use some blue Loctite. Call it a day. Yeah, let me slap this stuff on there. All right, so these are torqued. The torque sequence for this, as it calls, is get these down to 15 foot-pounds. Then we're going to go ahead and give them one full rotation backwards. So basically, we're going to unseat that. That's for both of these. Once that is kind of done, same thing as when we were going and make sure that these were aligned properly. 34 foot-pounds, 24 foot-pounds. That's it. So we're good. The markings, I like where the markings are at. The next thing to do is, if you're not doing lifters, you can slap this back on, put a new cam chest cover gasket. But what we're doing next, we're putting the lifters on. So my lifters, as I mentioned before, same thing when I was testing them. The new ones are soaking in the same motor oil. I'm gonna go ahead, take that oil pump and try to push more oil into these things to make sure there's no air bubbles. I did like how these came in. Fueling had them in a nice little bag. You can tell they were already saturated in oil. So I'll be putting these in. The way it's gonna go is we'll be popping these guys in here, and make sure you look at your lifter instructions. They do have a little oil hole. I'll show you here. I have an old one. So these old ones, that right there is where the oil goes to. That's where I'm putting the oil gun to make sure there's no air bubbles. So when you go ahead and put these in, there's a way that this oil hole is going to face. So there's oil passages through here, and the manual will tell you. Sometimes they don't, but the fueling ones did tell me, you know, hey, have them facing each other. I think it's what it was. I'll reread it. So I'll get these in. I'll go ahead and get the push rods in as well. I did check them for flatness. I rolled them across a flat surface. I shined some light on the back of them as they were rolling to see if they would bow. Those look good. So once I get that in, it's just, you know, new gasket time. That's really it. This kind of is the hard part. Make sure everything's fine, making sure everything's still in compliance. With this crankshaft in that dial gauge, you know, depending on how old the motor is and how much money you have into the bike, I'm just about a 5,000th on it. 5,000th is the kind of limit on the serviceability on that crank. But this is just not a bike that I'm gonna split the case, redo the crankshaft. You know, at that point I'll just get another motor. But that's not the case. I want to put it back together. Want to get it rolling down the road. Cool, guys. I'll take a pause here, and then we'll finish the lifters and the push rods here in a moment. All right, so got everything ready. Put the lifters in. These are the old ones. The new ones are already in, as you could tell. So looking at the manual, the documents themselves from the service manual don't specify which way that the oil feed needs to go right there. But the aftermarket lifters that I did buy, Fuels, I think, they do specify that on twin cams, these got to face the cylinders. So they got to go that way. And obviously they have a flat side. That flat side is where that little bar is going to ride so they don't rotate. Remember, you don't want this rotating on your cam. As that cam spins, once that starts to rotate, it won't roll anymore. It's going to cause all kinds of havoc. So that little guard pin right there, that flat little guard pin, make sure you don't forget that. My oil feed intakes are facing the cylinders on both of them. I've already had these, as you saw, sitting in a container of oil, and I've used the oil pump to make sure there's no holes in it anymore. Now, this means that I kind of got to get it running pretty soon because these do have oil bleed outs. So after a while, the oil will drain out. So if you're going to go ahead and pause this, I'd say keep them in oil. But when you're installing these, make sure you can turn the motor on, you know, recently, because the whole point of having them soaked, pumping them with oil, is so when you start it up, they're not bouncing around. They're waiting for the oil pump to then, you know, fill them up with oil, as they are hydraulic, obviously. So make sure you could go ahead and try to finish the job, get the motor started today. Go ahead. I'm going to put the caps on, the tubes as well. The gasket kit, I'm just going to go ahead and replace all the top end gaskets here. Obviously not the head one, but the valves, the push rods, O-rings, all that kind of good stuff while it's here. So yeah, almost there, guys. All right, so we got the new gasket in there. One thing, you do have to make sure you rotate the motor. So these are flush. So the top of the lifters are flush with the crankcase right there. If you notice on this side, this one's higher. You're going to have to go ahead, get that side done first, rotate the motor, then get this side. So this is going on, push rods are going on, and then we're going to go ahead and do that side as well. So make sure these are flush. If not, the push rods won't really fit, and we'll see how that goes now in a moment. All right, so as we said, we're working quicker because the lifters are in. don't want, you know, them to bleed out. They kind of bleed out overnight for most lifters, but I'm trying to get as much done here. So I'm jumping ahead. We got, last time you saw us, we had the lifters in here, the lifter caps. These are obviously the push rod tube protectors. There is a little cap. I'll have to squeeze in there to put tension on these things. That's a pain in the ass, but you don't have to do that right away. The next thing that I do want to show you, sorry for the camera, stop using my tripod here. So we went ahead, we put the rocker arm cradle in there. This was the first one we did. Definitely using Loctite on this. If you have the bike, if you have the motor in the bike, you have to actually put the rear bolts in first, wiggle it around to get it to seat, and then you could put these bolts on. So the rear cylinder is, you know, obviously the tightest, but you don't have to obviously pull the motor to get to this one. Front cylinder is all the space in the world. But yeah, so Loctite, this is calls for about 20 to 20 meters in here, 15-ish foot-pounds. So not super tight. These, I don't think I could find a torque on this one, but that's okay. Snug is snug. I did go ahead and change the kind of the breather element on this thing. Whatever, it came with a kit. Why not? So now I'm doing this side. We're, you know, get everything hand tight, snug. We could see that the push rods here are even. They're all the way bottomed out versus this one now is a little bit rotated. So I went ahead, I rotated the motor after this was put in. I could see them working. I'm checking for binding just in case anything is off. So I'm checking for binding. But these look good. I went ahead and give it a couple rotations, and then I checked the torque on that again because these lifters are going to push this entire assembly up. So I rotated it, let it sit down again, and check the torque just to make sure nothing was, you know, kind of off. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, crank everything down to torque. Again, you can see some of the Loctite in there. I'm going to give it a couple turns of the motor after the push rods have activated these, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten them again. So trying to work quick, that means less stuff's on video. I'm really bad about videoing the actual process. You know, definitely trying to see how I can improve, but we're getting there, guys. We're getting there. Okay, so like I said, we're working fast here. We got the valve covers on. We got the cam chest cover on, new gaskets, new thread locker on the bolts. Yeah, the kind of the hard part is shimming the push cover tubes. There's this little cap, so these kind of slide down and you have to pop the cap in. You got to use a screwdriver prying on the fins to push that little spring cap down, and it'll let you put this little tension cap on there. That's kind of the hardest part there. The rear cylinder, super tight, super tight to get that valve cover on. Make sure you guys understand that these are long bolts and those are short bolts, especially here. So that's on. I got a bunch of stuff to do up on the tank. Put that on. I really want to get this thing turned over and make sure that it's all good. So, I mean, that's kind of nasty. I bought myself a really cool steam cleaner from Amazon. It's like it's that small. It just heats up water, shoots steam from here. It's really good for cutting grease. I have used it to clean my chains. Keep in mind that the rubber, you know, with the heat of the steam and the rubber O-rings, you might get close to hardening the O-rings depending on how you're using out the rag, so be careful with that. If you have a roller chain, send the steam through it. Anyways, so before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and clean all this nasty gunk. I'm really gonna try to get this thing a bath. While it's here, might as well. So this thing has 83,000 miles. It's kind of nasty. As I go and break through taking stuff apart, I take my time to clean it. So let's not cut any short corners here and clean that mess up as well. Thanks.